So the Florida governor has declared war on its biggest employer, the Walt Disney Corporation. Could this finally be the Waterloo for one of America's biggest authoritarian wannabe governors? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So the Florida governor called a special session of the legislature with just one issue on the table, and that issue was passing a gerrymander of the state's congressional districts such that the Republicans succeeded in eliminating one of the two majority black districts in the state. But the governor thought, hey, while we've got everybody here for a blatantly political special session of the legislature, let's do another blatantly political action with this legislature. Within days of proposing it, the Florida legislature passed legislation that essentially stripped Disney World of the special tax status that it has enjoyed in Florida since 1972. Why would they do such a thing, especially given the fact that the Walt Disney Corporation is the largest private employer in Florida with over 80,000 direct employees to the company, also the largest corporate donor to Republican politicians, employing 38 lobbyists in the state's capital, Tallahassee, and one of the state's largest taxpayers. Doesn't exactly seem like the kind of organization that would be targeted by supposed pro-business Republicans, right? What's more is that this special tax status basically allowed Walt Disney World to run itself without any kind of local government interference. So Walt Disney World has its own fire department, its own police department, its own sewage treatment system, its own water system. It has issued municipal bonds on its own behalf to pay for many sewage improvements and road improvements. So while on the one hand this may be frustrating to Disney in that with the stripping of this special tax status, they'll have to now deal with these different local government entities. Disney World, as you know, is enormous, and it actually stretches into 2 separate counties in Florida. But because they stripped this special tax status from Disney, what's going to happen is that these services that the Disney Corporation provided to itself at Disney World will now have to be provided by the counties where it operates. And those municipal bonds that Disney World issued, well, guess what? They now become the responsibility of the counties. So where Disney used to be paying for all these things, now these things become the responsibility of all the taxpayers in the area. A local county official has stated that the result will probably have to be an increase of as much as 20% in property taxes to residents in those areas. Right about now, this is making absolutely no sense. Republicans are supposed to be supportive of business. They're supposed to want to keep taxes low, and it seems like they'd want to get along with such a potent political force in their state. I mean, you have to remember, while Disney has 80,000 employees in the state, Ron Desantis was only elected governor by 32,000 votes. I would say this is a pretty substantial constituency that Republicans don't really want to mess with. So why did they do this? Well, you might have read about Florida's Don't Say Gay legislation. This is the legislation that allows parents to essentially sue their school districts and their teachers if they mention anything that can be interpreted in any way to be related to gay people or transgender people or other marginalized groups. This legislation has also provided the basis for the Florida Department of Education to reject almost half of the math textbooks that were offered. Well, at first, the Disney CEO took a position that he really didn't want to take a position on this legislation. He was concerned that he'd get into a fight with Florida, and again, Florida and Disney kind of have a symbiotic relationship, with Disney World being such a huge part of the state's economy. I mean, for those of you who haven't been there, Disney is huge. I remember driving there the first time with my wife Madeline and our daughter Kelsey, and you cross the line into Disney World, and then you drive, and then you drive, and then you drive, and then you drive some more. They even have a radio station that is specifically tuned just for Disney World information. It is, in a word, enormous. They have a busing system that's so large, it's larger than the bus system that St. Louis has. And as I said before, they have their own water system and their own sewage system. So to say Disney is an enormous presence in Florida would be an understatement. And this really understates Disney's impact on the economy, given the fact that Florida overwhelmingly is a tourist economy. So essentially the central industry that dominates the Florida economy is basically run by this one company. So generally speaking, Disney have been very effective at lobbying in Tallahassee. As I mentioned before, they've got 38 lobbyists there and are the largest corporate donor to the Republican Party there. As a result of this legislation, though, Disney employees were outraged. And they were especially outraged about the fact that their CEO refused to take a stand on this legislation. I mean, historically, Disney has been very friendly to the LGBTQ community. In fact, in the 1990s, Disney generated some outrage among some of the right-wing evangelicals by hosting gay days at Disney World. Disney did not back down then. At any rate, Disney has a relatively new CEO, Bob Chapek, who didn't feel as comfortable taking a stand as the prior CEO did. As a result, he didn't want to say anything. But that did not sit well with Disney's employees, who know the company's history of toleration and inclusion. Disney's employees raised a huge ruckus. And as a result, a little late to the game, unfortunately, just a few days before the legislation would finally pass, Chapek and Disney came out against the legislation. And upon its passing, they said that they would pause their contributions to the Florida Republicans who pushed it through, and they would support efforts to overturn the legislation in the courts. Well, that statement that they would pause their contributions to Florida Republicans, well, that was a declaration of war, and something that Desantis and his cronies could not let stand. After all, Desantis has done everything he can to become America's next Vladimir Putin, crushing dissent and intimidating anybody who questions him. In fact, when this legislation came before the Florida legislature, DeSantis' crony, the Republican leader of the state Senate, did not even allow debate on the legislation. So where does this leave things now? Well, I think DeSantis feels he can't back down. He who aspires to be the Republican presidential nominee in 2024 has been trying to make a name for himself by engaging in these culture wars. And in fact, he leveled the fiercest, nastiest, negative criticism he could at Disney, which is calling them woke. Disney, on the other hand, really can't back down. The irony is, had Chapek taken a stand early on, he probably could have killed the legislation before it ever got to the floor. But because of the fact that he waited till the last minute until he was pressured by the employees, the Florida Republicans at that point couldn't back down with their legislation. And now Chapek knows that he can't back down from his commitment to his employees to do something about this legislation. So I would not be surprised if you see Disney playing a major role in the upcoming elections, potentially causing major heartburn for the Republicans, both Ron DeSantis and the state legislators who support him. All of them, of course, are up for re-election, and if DeSantis is defeated for governor, well, that would certainly put an end to his presidential aspirations. We'll see how this develops, but I sincerely hope that its employees continue to push the Disney Corporation to take a moral stand on this issue and to do everything they can to achieve real change in Florida, change that's long overdue. Well, DeSantis really has been a disaster for Florida. In fact, he's completely mishandled the COVID crisis, for example. Why don't you check out a video over here that I uploaded a while ago that discusses that problem. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.